What's up, guys? Welcome back to Loreverse, where we dive deep into stories, myths, and movies that shape modern storytelling, backed by Marvel, DC, Star Wars, and fantasy. And today we are tackling this idea about Christopher Nolan and the Odyssey. Yes, the Odyssey, one of the oldest and most influential stories ever told, and this is the blueprint for basically every hero's journey you've ever seen. But here's the thing, as much as Nolan loves to push boundaries, this might actually be the hardest movie of his entire career. And not just because of the scale or the effects, but because the Odyssey demands something Nolan has never done before, which is mythology. So let's break it down. Why adapting the Odyssey will challenge Nolan in every single way, creatively, emotionally, and even philosophically. So here's the first big thing. Christopher Nolan doesn't really do mythology. Now, yeah, his movies do feel mythic, like, the Dark Knight has god tier symbolism, right? Inception dives into dream worlds like a modern labyrinth, and Interstellar, literally deals with time and destiny. But those are all grounded myths, right? Scientific, psychological, and rationalized myths. Nolan's always found a way to make the impossible feel possible, and that's his trademark. But the Odyssey, that's a whole different world. We are talking gods, monsters, curses, and divine interventions. And there's no, quantum mechanics to explain why a man turns into a pig or why a goddess decides to toy with, human fate. It's just mythic truth. And that's what would make this hard for Nolan, because he's always searching for realism, even in time travel or dreams. The Odyssey will force him to step into pure mythic storytelling, something raw, ancient, and emotional in a way that logic can't touch. And it's not about bending physics, it's about faith, fate, and the gods. And that's completely foreign to Nolan's usual sandbox. Then you got the structure, right? The Odyssey isn't a simple three-act story. It's this epic, non-linear adventure that bounces all over the place, right? Time jumps, flashbacks, and multiple storylines all happening at once. Does that sound familiar? Yes. That's kind of Nolan's like bread and butter. But even he's never dealt with a narrative this sprawling, right? Odysseus, his journey, right, covers 10 years after the Trojan War. You've got a dozen like episodes that could each be their own movie. You have the Lotus Eaters, the Cyclops, you have Circe, you have the underworld, the sirens, and all of these things. And meanwhile, back in Ithaca, right, Penelope's dealing with suitors, right? Damascus is coming of age, and it's just a massive story and situation. So the question becomes, how do you make that coherent? Here's the thing about Nolan. Nolan loves precisions. His movies click together like a clock. The Odyssey is chaotic. It's dreamlike. It's almost like episodic. So if he tried to impose his usual precision, he might kill the magic. If he lets it breathe, it could also feel too unfocused for his style. And that tension, right, between mythic flow and narrative order is really a huge creative obstacle. And then there's the gods. What do you even do with them in a Nolan movie, right? Athena, Poseidon, Zeus, they're not metaphors. They're characters in this world. They directly influence the story, and they decide who wins and who suffers. Now, Nolan could reinterpret them, right? Maybe he makes them more of like cosmic forces, like embodiments of time, chaos, or reason. Or maybe they're seen through Odysseus, perspective, right? Psychological symbols instead of literal gods. But either choice changes the meaning of Odyssey. Because in the poem, the divine matters. Fate isn't an idea, it's a person with an agenda. And that's the kind of thing Nolan usually avoids. He loves stories where humans struggle against systems, times, dreams, morality, but those systems don't have faces. In the Odyssey, those systems do have faces. They have names, and sometimes they're pretty. So for Nolan, embracing that, making it mythic without losing his grounded tone, would be one of the hardest creative balances he's ever had to strike. Okay, so there's also the visual skill here. If you've watched Interstellar, Dunkirk, or Tenet, you know Nolan doesn't mess around when it comes to spectacle. He's obsessed with doing things practically, like real explosions, real IMAX camera, real physics. But the Odyssey would require the impossible. And how do you make a Cyclops feel real without CGI taking over? How do you feel sea monsters in camera? How do you capture a storm created by Poseidon himself? Water shoots alone are notoriously difficult. Ask anyone who's ever filmed on the ocean. Combine that with Nolan's need for realism and his hatred for the green screen, right? This is a production nightmare. But imagine the payoff. Actual location shoots across the freaking Mediterranean, sun-drenched Greek ruins, storms filled with IMAX cameras, ships built practically on real water. It'll be jaw-dropping. Still, everyone every one of those creative choices would push Nolan further than he's ever gone, technically, financially, and logistically. But maybe the hardest part isn't the gods or the monsters, but it's the heart of the story. Because the Odyssey isn't just about adventure, right? It's about It's about homecoming, right? It's about longing, love, and identity, and how war changes people. Odysseus isn't some perfect hero. You know what I mean? He lies, he cheats, he gets people killed. He's brilliant but broken. And when he finally makes it home, he's almost unrecognizable. And that's something Nolan could explore beautifully because he loves morally complex heroes, right? Cobb in Inception, Cooper in Interstellar, even Oppenheimer himself. But the emotional tone of Odyssey is ancient. It's not about redemption, it's about endurance. It's about surviving the will of the gods. So Nolan will have to find a modern emotional translation for that, something that still hits hard in today's world without losing the soul of the myth. Okay. And finally, there's the pressure of this. You're not just adapting a book here, you're touching one of the oldest stories humanity has ever told. The Odyssey is sacred to literature, to history, and to storytelling itself. You mess that up, and it's not just critics, it's academics, historians, mythologists, and everyone coming for you. It's the weight of legacy, and Nolan knows a thing or two about legacy. He's dealt with Batman, he's dealt with Oppenheimer. I mean, he's dealt with dreams and time, but this is the story that birthed storytelling. There's a reason most directors haven't touched it in decades. It's too big, it's too abstract, and it's too sacred. But that's also exactly why Nolan would be tempted by it, because he loves challenges that force him to evolve. So yeah, it's mythic, chaotic, emotional, philosophical, and massive in scale. It will push him beyond his comfort zone in every single direction. But if anyone could pull it off, it's probably him. Anyway, that's my breakdown of why the Odyssey is going to be Christopher Nolan's greatest challenge yet. Let me know down in the comments. Are you guys excited to see Nolan tackle the Odyssey, or do you think that the Odyssey is too ancient and too spiritual for his grounded style? This is the lore verse. This is where we bridge myth, movies and meaning via Marvel, DC, Star Wars, and all fantasy. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.